is on the die and mold sourcing challenges in EV. May I please request our moderator to join us, Mr. Akshay Kalyanpur, Director, Sridevi Tool Engineers Private Limited. List that I'd like to invite, that's Mr. Ramesh KS, Senior Vice President, Ather Energy. That's what I'd like to invite is Mr. Thej Kumar, Vice President, Operations, Product Development, Quality, Toyoda Gosei, South India Private Limited. This is Mr. Vinod Kubher, Partner, Prabha Industries. Let's release, may I invite Mr. Rajeev Chopra, Director, Strategic Sourcing and Supply Chain, Ola Electric Technologies Private Limited.
First of all, I hope everybody had a good lunch. Don't worry, this is going to be an exciting session, so I'm sure you'll not doze off. Firstly, I would like to thank Tagma for giving all of us this opportunity to discuss about the challenges. Now, discussing the challenges in the die and mold is a soft topic because I am part of the challenge. So, but the topic reminds me of a book called What the Customer Wants You to Know by an author, Mr. Ram Charan. He's an author. Forbes magazine has called him probably the world's most influential consultant alive. And in his book, he writes that traditional sales technique is totally wrong. You normally put a product first and you tell the customer, this is my product. So he says you need to let go of that and you need to start first with the customer's problem. So this is what we'll do in this session. And majorly, we'll try and focus on two areas, that is capability and capacity. So going straight, diving in, Ramesh ji, can you tell us anything about some projects that you have worked on where you faced capability as a problem or a constraint in tool rooms?
I think that has been a constant challenge throughout my journey in automotive industry. Capability, I would like to say in three different aspects, right? One is you look at it as people, look at it as technology, and look at process and systems. In people front, the kind of challenges we faced when I worked within the tool rooms or you work with the top talent for a project, but the next project is gone. He or she is gone, right? So I think, I believe tool makers, die makers have got one of the major challenges getting the right high competent people, and that's just the beginning of the problem. Retaining them is a very, very big challenge, I believe, because everybody aspires to go from a tool room to a tier 1 to a OEM, right? So there's a continuous brain drain that happens. So the biggest challenge I have faced when working in tool room is continuity of, you learned something in your last project. If I go to the same tool room, will I get the same lessons learned from them? It's a challenge because those guys, the key guys are gone, right? So that is a major competency or a capability challenge I have faced. The other is technology, right? Many of the technologies we have is on a sunrise, which means we are starting from scratch, which means we use a lot of first principle based engineering, right? I think and also we want to go very fast. Time to market is of essence, which means we want to do a lot of things on the digital front, even before you start cutting metal, right? How you do simulations, how far you understand the manufacturing tech to do a great simulation, that is a challenge. And even if you do that, getting that tool first time right. There's a T0, T1, T2. As a tier 1, as a OEM, our expectation is the tool should deliver the T2 deliverables in T1. So I think times have changed. There I think there's a technology challenge. The other aspect of technology is speed. Even now, if you want speed, we want to go to China or Korea, right? And the process and systems, I think overall, the common denominator for all this is what kind of processes and disciplines, what kind of management styles you have, and do you have structures in place very similar to OEM or a tier 1? I think that's the third aspect of capability. That's how I see it.
And a follow-up question to that, are there any components that you find Indian tool rooms are not capable enough to do it and for which you have to go overseas, or have you kind of localized your sourcing?
I think by and large, some of the large tools, I think Thej can add more color to it. If you look at from an industry perspective, dashboards and things like that, I think there's still a preference to go overseas, okay? But even within that, if you see lamps, whether it's a four-wheeler lamp or a two-wheeler lamp, there's a tendency for all lighting companies to only go to China, Taiwan, Korea, right? Which makes me, I was just sharing an experience with you. I am working on a very intricate sintered product component right now for my 450X. And my supplier partner made a tool, a sintering tool, which is very complex, and the die broke twice. And I asked him, how are you going to come out of it? He said, I'm going to get it from China, okay? So I find it personally very offended as an Indian to say that, hey, I made 2 tools, I was not able to make it work, and I'm going to get it from China. So I think highly, and this is not, it's a sintering tool, so high technology applications where you should know how to work on a very unique steel. I think that is still a challenge. And high precision applications, like how do you make a prism? I think those are areas we still have challenges on.
So I hope people in the audience have listened to his challenges, and if you have a solution for that, you may approach him after the session. Rajeev, same question to you also. Do you face any issues in the Indian tool rooms with respect to capability? Are there any critical parts for which you're facing constraints and you can't develop them in India for any reason?
Yeah, thank you very much. I would start with a positive note. So, in this industry, past 2.5 decades when I'm working, I see India has leaped in the area of tooling. Whenever we used to talk about skin panels or big moldings, we used to talk about China, Korea. But now, no, we have, I think, people sitting here in this room who are capable to make skin panels. Now, I will not say that we are at that rate. There may be reasons for that. First example, if you talk about a sheet metal dies, our casting makers, which are at tier 1 for a tool maker, will take 15 days to 20 days time. But a Korean can do it in when you give him a pattern in 2 days time. Pattern he can make in 1 day time. And wherever we are talking about tooling, we want everything fast. Because the turnaround time of the whole whatever product we are developing, we need to do it in a very fast way. So yeah, India has to go to that level where, I'm not sure about the molding industry, but yes, for the casting industry or for the sheet metal industry, the turnaround time is still not to what we get in Korea. The T0 part we get, to the quality we get. So we need to, I will not say we are not there, but we need to skill up more. Right. But if you see past 2.5 decades I was talking about, we have really come through the digital technology which we talk about right now, Sir has talked about. The digital technology for simulation, for example, was not there. Now we have dearth of people who know all this knowledge about mold flows or autoform or PAM stamp, and all these technologies are stepping stones to reduce the time and increase our capability. And even the tryout stage used to take a lot of time. So that is also reduced. So we have new technologies coming in electric. For example, we use aluminum, one of the component for a bus bars, and bringing that to speed, to the productivity, to the capacity. So that also, I think our tool makers and all our fraternity is working very closely with us. We need to have 2 things in mind. One is cost and one is time. Quality, of course, comes with both of them. So these 2 things will never be, and as the time is going by, we are right now, a startup, we require everything now. It doesn't happen tomorrow and we need now. Yeah. So that is a challenge which we have right now, and the challenge is thrown to the tool makers, to our fraternity, and this challenge is accepted by many, and they are running very fast with us. This is my answer.
Thank you. So it's good to know that capability of Indian tool rooms is not a constraint. Where the problem probably lies is in the capacity, probably scaling up, because your problem of getting it delivered in a shorter time could also be related to a little bit of capacity constraints. So capability probably is not a problem. We are nearly there. Maybe a little bit notch we must go up. But I would take away that capacity constraints could be more than the capability issue. And my next question is to Thej-san. Thej-san, Toyota and Maruti are your major customers. They don't yet have a fully electric vehicle. Do you foresee when these 2 OEMs get into the electric segment, do you think the designs are going to be radical, that our capability may not be there to manufacture those molds? Do you think that's the case?
Good afternoon, Namaskara, and thank you, Akshay, and thank you, Tagma, for this opportunity. Looking ahead of the future, where people are talking about EV and hybrid cars today, and surging ahead when we talk about the EV cars per se, where probably one big change point is like the IC engines are not there. And when you look from the vehicle design perspective point of view, you see the front of the vehicle, you have the radiator grills, the bumpers, the headlamps, etc. So the radiator grills primarily are designed in relation to the engine present in the vehicle. However, you can't make a car look awkward without the front design. Just because you don't have an IC engine, you have a battery operated car. So the dynamics of an electric vehicle will not see a sea change in terms of the appearance. Probably it gives more opportunity to come up with innovative ideas of making the vehicle more presentable in terms of the appearance aspect, because, and of course the functionality will always be there. It has to meet the impact properties of the vehicle, to meet the crash regulations of the regulatory authorities. So when we are talking from the innovative point of view, I just want to quote a simple example of the latest, one of the vehicles which we find very recently, the Hyundai Varna. I just giving an example here. You can see the front is totally a changed version. It doesn't look like a conventional car. It's like one single LED light running from end to end. So these sort of things, and if you look at the other electric cars present in the India market, the front grille appearance has changed. So the challenges for the Indian tooling industries could be little more prominent. However, the capability point of view, I don't foresee there could be a big challenge in terms of the Indian tooling industry not capable to do so. I think rather than capability, I think what we need to look at is the compatibility. How can the tooling industry look from the perspective of the design requirements of the OEM, which in turn is based on the market requirements. So to make such products, as Ramesh was talking about the skill, talking about the use of technology, everything comes in place. So a drastic change is not expected for the tool makers per se when we are talking about the EV segment changes coming into the vehicle. There could be some components under the bonnet, under the hood, which comes for a change, where precision will be very, very important, and certain specialty materials will come into picture. But from the tooling point of view, I don't foresee a very big change or challenge which our Indian tool makers will not find it a Herculean task. They can tide over that sort of challenges, is what I strongly feel.
I'm glad to hear that you're the third person on the panel who's saying capability doesn't seem to be an issue, even if the design of the vehicle may be radically different than an ICE engine. Now, we can't move on to the next segment without asking Vinod San's opinion. What are your challenges with respect to EV, non-EV, or is skill set a problem in the tool rooms, or retaining them is a problem? I would like to hear your opinion, please.
Sure, yeah, get me started. In terms of challenges, right, from my vantage point, I'd like to sort of list them in two silos. The first, I would say, if you're talking about recent things, advent of electrics and what you see coming at you, of course, the challenging projects of the past year where we couldn't make a part, right? And it turned out other countries had the same problem on that part. So with continuing emphasis on lightweighting, the challenges are going to be handling higher and higher tensile strength and more complex geometries and stuff, right? So you got to be really good with your engineering. You got to keep improving. So that's one challenge. There always seems to be a gap. Of course, it's true in other economies as well. The other such new thing I'm seeing is For example, Prabha is a good fuel tank maker, sheet metal fuel tank die maker, right? And for two-wheelers, four-wheelers, even more wheelers, we make fuel tank dies. But in an electric where the tank is gone, you're going to end up with what powers it, which is the battery-related parts. So we've been getting some RFQs for small parts like battery can and so on. So handling those is a challenge. I don't think, at least I've not seen those parts run in India. They've been the forte of the Far East, China and Taiwan and Korea and stuff. But if those things are going to make it here, we've got to make ourselves capable of handling them. So a couple of types of challenges. You mentioned a few other things. I'll try to summarize it in a few sentences. I would say one part is being able to spec out something and then go about making it. When you do make a die to the design and you go up to make sample parts, at that time you're going to find out, oh, I have this problem, the part's not making, it's cracking and so on. So that calls for very good problem-solving capabilities. If you, obviously, most of us here have been at die shops in other parts of the world. The analytical approach to things, the problem-solving requirement in those phases are very important. I think we continue to face challenges there, and we're trying to move our best minds radically out to those areas. So, yeah, I'm not sure if I answered all your questions.
You did. Skill set and manpower was my follow-up question, which you did. It's also interesting to know that with electrification, there'll also be certain components that you will miss out on. So that's, I think, part and parcel of development of technology.
I hope we don't miss out on them.
Yeah, but I think I'm fair to assume that electric cars are not going to replace all the ICE cars immediately in the near future. It might happen in the long-term future. So I think there will be development in both the segments. There will be startups coming up with electric vehicles. There will also be OEMs wanting to venture or eat some part of the pie. Do you have the capacity in order to meet both the demands of your existing customers and also startups? Tell us about capacity at your end. How was business last year versus what's in the future for you?
I'll start with the latest question. Business last year to how things are now. So last year was our worst year in our company's history. We didn't see the impact of COVID right away. Like we caught the cold much later is what I'd like to say. So as a result of COVID and a lot of things last year wasn't good for us. And I understand that it's the case for some other die makers also. This year looks good. And from our look ahead, next year is looking promising as well, right? So that's the answer to that. The next question of yours was capacity. Yeah, we are going about adding capacity. I'd like to say we're adding a certain type of capacity that would enable us to make bigger dies. Like you mentioned skin panels and stuff. We're trying to be able to service those types of requirements by OEMs. Hitherto, they were just imports, not even a thought, right? But now OEMs have come to us on skin panel requirements. Skin panels also tend to be large parts, so you'll have to invest in very heavy equipment, bigger presses, and so on. We're going about doing that.
Right. So you would be answering the capacity crunch that most of your customers would be talking about, or would be fearing that, you know, the advent of the number of vehicles that are getting launched, or the OEMs or the startups that are coming in this segment, we don't see a growth of tool room happening, right? So all of the new people will still have to use the old supply base. So it's going to be a challenge unless tool makers like you would add capacity, right? Thej-san, with certain Toyota models being sold out for 2 years, this is the condition with ICE engines for you. Do you foresee, as a tier 1, you will have the capacity whenever your principal moves into electrification of their lineup? do you see there'll be a trade-off between ICE cars, or you think the ICE cars will still continue with the same numbers, but you will need to add capacity for the EV?
It's a straight answer that our growth is always dependent on OEM's growth. So as and when the OEMs grow, we proportionately need to grow, and that's where the question comes in terms of expansion of our facilities or infrastructure comes into. And yes, as we see the next 2 to 3 years, I think the Indian economy is really shaping up well, and the Indian automotive market is slated to be the, the key focused aspect when it comes to the contribution to the Indian economy. So we are also in line with this thoughts, and as and when the OEMs are planning for their newer models, so we are also in the process of expanding our infrastructure and facilities, be it be from the machines, or be it be from the technology, or from the new plants and setup per se, from the operations what we carry on. But the challenge what we really look at is, as you rightly mentioned about the capacity of tool rooms. It's not a point to blame anybody, but that's the reality that today almost all OEMs in India are doing pretty well, which is good for the country. However, to cater to the growing demand of the tool makers, OEMs requirements, the number of tool making companies in India. We have talked about capability. It is not just capability, it's capacity is a big challenge. And when the present tool rooms are totally tied up or booked up for the next year or couple of years, so that is where the pressure creeps on the OEMs and tier ones like us to jump the border and look at other countries. So it is a very dicey situation, if you ask, and it's an opportunity lost for some, but if you take up in the right perspective, this is the time the opportunity lies for all the people sitting in this room. Yes, with a 5-year trajectory, Indian tool makers can really think of putting in the best resources, mainly from the capacity point of view, and not to forget the skill of the manpower, which is very much required once you build on the capacity you need. So this is a situation where every one of us need to work together and see that capacity enhancement happens. But again, just comparing the Indian tool industry with the other, we always talk about Korea, China and Taiwan, which are quite popular. What is the difference between us and them? Here we have, say, 10 tool making companies, and all of them will be doing every activity and trying to pick up the pie. Unlike in other countries where they specialize in one activity and it goes on. A company specialized in milling operation, a company specialized in wire cutting. You know, they try to segment those activities, and everybody will be in the pipeline of, contributing to one single project. Here it's a competitive world, and everybody would like to try to encash. In the process, some tool rooms are fully booked, some tool rooms are empty. So how the tool industry needs to come to augment the capacity of each other, handhold together, so unutilized capacities can be looked into, because that is where I feel still there is a potential of another 20 to 30% of opportunities which we can really encash upon. So that is the biggest concern now I can see from the capacity point of view from the tooling segment. But for the OEMs, most of us are growing, most of them are growing, and tier ones, most of them are in line with the expansion plans, and there is no stopping on this.
Interesting that you said that tool makers should also collaborate, because always there's a scene where a particular quarter in a year, a particular tool room doesn't have business, but his immediate competitor would have a lot of business, and that particular competitor would be struggling to meet the demands and milestones. So if our customers like Maruti and Toyota can collaborate, even though they are competitors, why can't tool rooms, right? So it's an interesting point and a point to ponder also. My next question would be to Rajeev ji. Do you find an issue, or do you struggle to find capacity in tool rooms? Because I would like to believe that your lead times of projects might be very short, and most of the tool rooms existing would be making molds for the ICE motorcycles and scooters. So do you struggle to find capacity and slots in tool rooms?
I would first generally answer your question, just what support to Thej-san. When we go to China or Korea, we see that 50 Okumas or 100 CNC machines lined up, Makinos and all. Investment is to the core, means, and you go, and they will get also business to meet that. And our Indian tool makers are struggling to invest more. So my first point would be to meet the capacity in India for our tool makers. The government should bring some provision, and investors should think in the TAGMA type of associations and tooling industries to thrive them. And the investment is highly required in area of infrastructure and machinery, which will make our country to the next level. So other thing which I saw in Korea specifically, and to the same answer to that question, how do you collaborate? If you go to any city, they will have meetings. Tool makers will have meetings, and they will discuss the orders they got in the specific area, and they will share their orders. And that type of thing I saw in Korea. If I am suppose going to a Korean tool maker, he will say, I am full, but I will suggest you to go to that. And immediately the person will come on board, or even if they take the order, they will distribute to their fellow friends. We are starting in India. We are not to that level. As you rightly said, that some tool rooms are completely full, and some are, So this is about the tooling industry, but OEMs knowing about the challenges are managing their tooling business inside. So I see Maruti opening 2 die shops, Mahindra having a big die shop, Tata Motors also having, Toyota also, I think, has associations with tooling industry. So that is also good to have inside, but we need to thrive the tooling industry outside. But now coming to our organization, we don't see any issue in respect to the two-wheeler segment. The type of tooling we are making and all, we get good amount of technology and people who are doing the tooling. Only issue what I just said was the time. We are facing issues in making prototypes in few days. I cannot tell you how much. So everything is now, as I said. So prototyping has to be done very fast. This is one area where our industry thinks only rapid prototyping is the way. No. We can have to go for the soft tooling, and that also very fast. And it's a good money-making business for the tool makers, prototyping. And when we are going for new models, we need to test, we need to see how it looks like. And prototyping is one area which we struggle. And as I told you that the electric technology comes with aluminum bus bars, this is which area where we need to bring more tool makers which we can work in that area.
I completely agree to your point. When you go overseas and you see the scale of operations that's happening over there, and when you come back and you see probably their smallest tool room is also bigger than the biggest tool room in India. So yes, time is also a factor that gets elongated because there's not enough capacity, right? So most of the tools are waiting outside machines for the machines to get free. So again, we come back to the same thing. Capability is not an issue. To reduce timeline, we need to add capacity, come what may, right? Now, Ramesh ji, I would ask the same question to you. What's your opinion on this?
I think more recently we have not been facing this issue on finding capacity. And what we do is we do early engagement while we are still in the drawing board. We start interacting with tool rooms and give a view of when we are going to kick off a tool. So what we have been trying to do recently, I think few of you are also involved with this conversation, is we try to give early visibility on the steel guys or the hot runner suppliers on the tool rooms, we give early visibility so that we can plan together. So because we are doing this collaboration, we are not recently faced any capacity issues. But having said that, normally tool room, we see generally a lot of queuing that happens. The lead time is primarily occupied by queuing rather than the value add time. So that's where, to what Rajeev said and Thej said, tool rooms coming as a conglomerate and try to partner with each other will go for a win for everyone. I would also want to give a different tangent to capacity, right? One is the capacity of what we need today, but looking at where the market is going. Yeah, so if you look at, I'll give two different examples. For example, to talk to steel parts, you could have lot more need for laminations. Okay, so how does Tagma or big companies come together to think about, hey, how do we create those capabilities for what's going to come ahead? Because motor is going to be a reality. Not only in the auto space, if I take a step back and look at what's all happening around us, everywhere there is a change in technology because of the EV thing. A lot more brushless DC motors and things like that are coming in all applications, right? So how do you prepare ourselves for, how do you prepare the capacities for what's going to come? Cell manufacturing is just coming up, right? Eventually, many companies have pitched for it, and each cell has got a lot of steel in it. Good news to you. So you're losing probably a fuel tank, but a lot of cell manufacturing will come in, right? So how do we all work together, collaborate as OEM, Tier 1, and tool makers? How do we have this kind of conversation to say what technology is coming, what kind of capacity we need to have 2 years down the lane? I think that will enable us not to go beyond the boundary.
Well, thank you for your inputs. I think this is a good podium to convey the message of capacity, so tool makers can go ahead and book machines because they can anticipate some more development work to happen in the future for sure. And looking at the lead times of machine delivery, probably they can take a decision as early as today. I have avoided a tricky area which is on commercials. So we spoke about capability, we spoke about capacity. Now the dangerous third C is commercials. So my question is, are Indian tool makers expensive? Anybody? You wear both the hats.
No.
Anybody wants to start? Do you find cost competitiveness also a constraint for EVs?
No, I think we are all very competitive and cutthroat competition in India. But the mentality for OEMs is, okay, if I need to make a skin panel tool, let me go to Korea. There I'm ready to pay this much bucks more. But the same thing which has to be done in India is, so that's where we need to pitch upon that Indian tool makers also need money and they also need to thrive. They also need to, so only thing is, as I said, especially for technology, we have the technology. Digital, we have the digital. We have the connectivity. We have the capability. More incentives to Indian tool makers and giving them that, that some investors, like Tagma can be one area where investors can be given to the tool makers and they can also bring that technology, like for example, casting itself. In India, the casting makers don't work for the tool makers. Especially for they work for all industry. But in Korea, for example, they're especially working for the tool making industry. Similarly, there are many areas where tool makers have to, our country has to come to that level. That our GDP also we can say with this much percentage is because of the tool making. So, although it has come down 50%, but 50% still to go. So, we are competitive. Answer is competitive. We have to be more. Time and quality consciousness is where our tool makers have to thrive more because that is what is there in the West and we need to bring it here. Yeah, we have many people gone to the West, get trained, come here, companies, multinationals coming and training people, but now we have to start performing.
Glad to know cost is not a constraint. Now I'll hand it over to Ramesh ji for his opinion.
I think cost is not a problem, okay? But when you sit across the negotiation table, I don't think you will hear the OEM say, your cost is great, okay? I think they have to do their job, but I think that's not a challenge. right? I think the Indian tooling industry is doing fairly well in terms of cost competitiveness. And even if we go to China, Korea, it's not because they are cheaper. It's generally because of the availability or time to, we want it in 6 weeks or something. Let's remind ourselves that if we go to China and Korea, it's extremely difficult for us to coordinate language barriers, do trials, send the right raw material for trials and all that stuff. And most of the time, we airlift the tools. Okay? Please remember, that's big money. It's indirect cost, right? And the OEMs are very cognizant that, hey, you go to China, then you also pay customs duty and airlifting and all the stuff, right? So I don't think tooling guys should really worry too much. I should not say this as an OEM. Sorry, my tooling guy is somewhere at the back. My apologies to you. But I don't think there's too much worry about commercials. And we don't really source by saying who's the L1. We look at what's the competency, what's the capability of the tool room, and nobody's here for charity. So I think we have to pay for the quality we get.
I'll just sum it up a bit and then I'll hand it over to you. So the reason I ask is I want you all to give confidence to the tool makers because if they are not cost competitive, then they would not think about doing capex. Because if they know that the buyer is not going to pay them enough, then probably they would not want to add a technological superior product at their shop floor. So the only reason to ask is so that you can encourage tool makers to put up more capacity. Over to you, Vinod.
You spoke a part of what I had in mind. The other aspect I wanted to throw out was, like here, if you sit down with an OEM or any customer who wants to order a die, it's like, how many rupees is it per kg? We've quoted 300, they want 200 and stuff. But in the West or some other economies, it's not like that at all. I'd also like to encourage OEMs to put a more technical pressure on your own buyers, where the conversation is definitely a little more conducive to attack the problems you yourself might have. I think somewhere in the chain of command, the buyer is under pressure, kg, this many rupees and so on. But the real people, I'm not hearing it, guys. I think the point's made.
It was a popular point for sure. Tej-san, you recently had localization content in your OEMs increased from 35% to 87% or so. Do you think the Indian tool rooms are expensive and you faced any challenges while localizing? What's your opinion on this?
My answer would be, first, Indian tool makers have become very competitive. What they were 10 years, 12 years before, today they are in the race with the global tool makers. The question now is the way ahead. When we see from the cost perspective alone, you can perceive in many directions. But that's not the point which I would like to say. And either a OEM or a Tier 1 will not be bent upon seeing only the cost factor. And today, without naming the tool makers or some of the products, OEMs or Tier 1s are ready to pay that extra plus alpha money to get the desired quality and the desired deliverables in the right time. So that is very clear. So it's not only cost factor which decides the selection of a tooling partner. Having said that, it's a question mark to every tool maker. Why is that? And Vinod gave a couple of examples as how it is perceived. I am looking from a different perspective, which I always talk to the tool makers whenever I meet them. As per the global survey, the world's best manufacturing facilities, I'm not talking about tool makers, I'm talking about the so-called the best manufacturing companies have 30 to 40% wastage in their operations. Please note this point. what we defined and you get in the National Geographic Channel and we have seen and we have read in the Forbes magazine or anything, they have 30 to 40% wastage in their operations. So just look back at your own operations in your own plant. I mean to say, including my plant. If you try to look at the wastages, what's happening in every gamut of activities, be it from the planning perspective, be it from the raw material procurement and usage perspective, every wastage we are building into the cost of our tool or the product finally. If every tool maker and if every tier one looks at this type of wastages and cuts down all these things, I think we are definitely one step above all the global tool makers or all the above global manufacturers, because we never look at, when you quote for a particular tool, you build in the wastages there. As Ramesh was telling, you build cost for 5 trials. What's the purpose? Why do you want to waste? It's a waste of money, it's a waste of time, and finally it adds on to your cost, and you have to build it onto your customer. So naturally your quote will be definitely higher. So if every one of us, if every one division of the organization starts looking at plugging those wastes one by one, including the management waste. I am not looking at raw material waste, including the management waste. From top to the bottom, the top line to the front line, we can reduce 15 to 20% of today's cost, what you are quoting. Tomorrow, if you want to go and quote, survey for 15 days and see where all you are losing money. Probably the quote, what you have done tomorrow, after 15 days, you will revise it and bring it down by 15% straight away. This is reality. And we need to focus on that reality. Across, I am not just quoting this for the tool makers, I am telling to every manufacturing company. We are in a very comfortable position, not competitive. We will be above the competition and we will be able to garner more business. This is my say. Thank you.
So I completely agree. There is every penny that you save, every leakage that you plug gets added to the bottom line. So instead of asking for more money from the customer, which is a tougher job, we would rather look at our operations and plug the leakages for sure that there is hidden profit over here. Unfortunately, we need to move on for the next speaker to come on. Yeah.
Just to add what Tej-san said, I've gone through the Toyota product development system. Lean product development system is something buzzword which Toyota has designed years before. And now what he is saying, we as tool makers and the industry has to work upon the lean product development, not the manufacturing. Manufacturing, we know, we have learned a lot from the manufacturing side, but the product development side, what he's talking about, is a very important topic which I think can be a homework for all of us when we go back.
So thank you. I've been warned twice already. Time's up. We can probably go on days and days and talk about this topic. But thank you, gentlemen, for your inputs. Majorly, they were all positive, encouraging to the tool rooms to add capacity. And once again, I thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.